Before we begin, this episode contains stories that were buried, not because they were forgotten, but because they were forbidden. We're crossing from the temples of Egypt into the stone tablets of Sumer, where God did not create the world out of love or balance, but out of need, out of design, out of something that might feel a little too close to us. As always, I'm not here to teach doctrine. I'm not a scholar. I'm a human being following the trail of what was whispered and what was rewritten. This episode explores myth, origin stories, and the serpent as a symbol of memory, not sin. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good, because that's where the real remembering begins. Welcome to episode 9, Clay and Code, the serpent that wasn't lying. Before the Bible, before Eden, before Genesis whispered, "Let there be light," there was Sumer, a land between rivers, a cradle of writing, of ziggurats, of gods who didn't dwell in the sky, but descended from it. They were called the Anunnaki, the ones who from heaven to earth came. Not messengers, not angels, but beings of power and presence who shaped the land, carved the rivers, raised the heavens. And they were tired. The myths tell us the Anunnaki were burdened with labor, digging canals, moving stone, maintaining what they had made. But creation was work, and the gods apparently didn't like working forever. So one of them, Enki, god of the deep waters, of wisdom, of trickery and mercy, offered a solution. Let us create workers. And that's where we came in. According to the Atrahasis and other ancient tablets, humans weren't created in love or delight, but as labor replacements, molded from clay. But clay alone wasn't enough. Clay is matter, but life needed spirit, will, consciousness. And for that, the gods needed blood. Not just any blood. They needed the blood of a god. So they chose one to be sacrificed, a rebel god. In some versions, he is Geshtui, a lesser deity associated with wisdom or perception. In others, he is Kingu, the leader of Tiamat's army in the older Babylonian creation myth. Whoever he was, he had stood on the wrong side of divine order. He had questioned, rebelled, or simply disobeyed. And for that, he was offered up. His blood was drained, his essence taken, and it was mixed with clay. From that sacred violence, the first humans were formed. So what does that mean? It means we weren't just born of earth. We were born of defiance. Our very spark came from a god who wouldn't submit, a being who was too much for the order of things, whose essence carried memory, will, rebellion, and maybe something dangerous. We weren't made in the image of peace. We were made in the shadow of a light, a body of earth, a spark of God, a bloodline of memory. And at the center of this story, again, is Enki, the god who oversaw this ritual, who shaped the first bodies, who breathed life into clay. Enki was not a punisher. He was a trickster, a protector, a giver of forbidden things. And in ancient symbols, Enki was linked with the serpent. Not the one who deceives, but the one who liberates. So let's remember, the oldest story of our creation says we carry the blood of the rebel. Not cursed, not fallen, wired for remembrance. The first humans were not perfect, and they were never meant to be. In the oldest stories, creation wasn't a miracle. It was a project, a problem to solve. The gods, the Anunnaki, were tired of working, so they shaped humans from clay, hoping we'd take over the burden. But Enki wasn't working alone. Beside him stood a goddess, Ninma. She is also called Ninhursag, the Lady of the Mountain, a divine sculptor, a shaper of life. Together they molded bodies from earth. They formed limbs, faces, bellies, bones, and the results weren't right. One human couldn't walk, another had trembling hands. One was blind, another was mute. One lacked genitals, one could not control their urine. They weren't cursed, they weren't punished, they were just the first drafts. And then the story turned stranger. In a version recorded around 2100 before Common Era, Ninma creates these flawed humans intentionally as part of a divine challenge. She dares Enki, "If I shape beings with limitations, can you find a purpose for them?" Enki tries, assigns roles, makes up destinies, but none of it fits, and eventually he fails. This isn't a myth of holy precision. It's a myth of divine error, of experiments, of gods pushing the edges of what they can control. And it gets more layered, because later in the story, Enki himself becomes impaired, paralyzed, drunk, or perhaps mocked through myth. And Ninma? She refuses to heal him. The one who gave function to the flawed now finds himself broken. And the mother of form simply says, "I will not help." So what do we do with this? What does it mean that our oldest creation stories begin not with glory, but with flawed bodies? It means that disability, difference, and divine imperfection are not footnotes in our origin. They are the center. Humans were incomplete by design, born from clay and blood, yes, but also from imbalance, error, and unexpected outcomes. And yet, they were still made, still alive, still sacred. And at the center of it all, again, is Enki, the one who shaped bodies that didn't function, the one who gave minds to those who couldn't speak, the one who tried to make meaning and then let go. He didn't create perfection, he created awareness. And awareness doesn't stay quiet. It asks questions. It remembers things it was never taught. It reaches for the edge of the page. And when that spark rises in the wrong body, the flawed, the forgotten, the discarded, it becomes rebellion. It becomes magic. It becomes dangerous. And maybe that's why the next thing the gods tried to control wasn't the body. It was knowledge. Long before Eden, before Eve, before a garden and a tree and a whisper that split history in two, there was Enki, and there was knowledge. In the myths of Sumer and Babylon, Enki wasn't just the one who helped make humans. He was the one who gave them more than they were meant to have. Wisdom, language, tools, dreams. He stole the sacred me, as you say it, divine laws and technologies, and gave them to humanity. He gave us forbidden fire long before Prometheus. He gave us forbidden knowledge long before Eden. He gave us remembrance before any serpent ever opened its mouth. In Sumerian myth, the me was sacred codes, the building blocks of life, culture, existence itself. They governed kingship, music, law, craftsmanship, sexuality, war, speech, emotion, truth. And Enki took them. He passed them down to the human world, to cities, to temples, to people made of clay and rebel blood. Why would he do that? Why give everything to the ones born to serve? Because maybe Enki remembered the rebel. Maybe he was the rebel in disguise. Maybe he knew, once humans tasted knowledge, they would never stop reaching for more. And the gods? They didn't like that. In the book of Genesis, a serpent appears. He speaks to the woman, tells her the truth. Eat this and your eyes will open. Not a trick, not a lie, just a memory. That story didn't come from nowhere. It came from Sumer, from a serpent who didn't deceive, but delivered, from a god who gave too much and was punished in silence, from a knowledge we were never meant to have, but now carry anyway, in blood, in story, in spine. Before Eden, before the Bible named the serpent a villain, the serpent was already waking us up, and the gods were already trying to stop it. What if the first crime wasn't eating the fruit? What if it was offering it? Not as a trap, not to deceive, but to awaken. Because long before Eden, a serpent gave us something we weren't meant to have. Language, desire, fire, memory. And the gods, they didn't curse us because we failed. They cursed us because we remembered. And maybe that's the real reason they changed the story. They needed the serpent to become the villain, because they knew we would follow her. And once you start remembering, you don't go back to sleep. Not all serpents speak. Some watch, some guard, some wait at the gates of things you were never meant to survive. Inanna, Queen of Heaven, goddess of love, war, fertility, sex, prophecy, power, and death. In one of the oldest surviving poems in the world, The Descent of Inanna, she leaves her throne, her temple, her jewels, and chooses to go down. Not fall. Descend. She moves toward the underworld, not because she is cast out, but because she has something to reclaim. Her sister, Ereshkigal, rules below, the dark mirror, the shadow queen, two faces of the same force, one above, one beneath. To enter the underworld, Inanna must pass through 7 gates. At each one she is stripped. Her crown, her beads, her staff, her robe, her rings, her breastplate, her identity. By the time she reaches the throne of her sister, she is naked, unarmed, nothing but presence and memory. And then she dies. Inanna is struck down, hung on a hook, 3 days and nights in silence. The world above begins to fail. Fertility halts. Sex loses its fire. The spiral collapses. But before she left, Inanna made sure of something. She sent a message, arranged a rescue, and when she returns, she is not the same. In some variations of the myth, the gates of the underworld are guarded, not by men, not by angels, but by serpents, coiled at the thresholds, silent, unmoving. The serpent doesn't stop her, but it witnesses the descent. It marks the line between what is left behind and what cannot be carried forward. So what does it mean? That one of the most powerful goddesses in ancient memory had to die before she could rise? What does it mean that a serpent waited at the gate? Maybe the serpent wasn't guarding the path to hell. Maybe it was guarding transformation, watching to see who would walk through the gate and have the courage not to return the same. Inanna descended. She rose. She changed. And the serpent didn't punish her for it. It let her through. Because not all gates are locked. Some are just waiting for you to step through. The serpent didn't stop her, didn't strike, didn't lie. It watched. It waited. It let her fall through the gates so she could rise whole. Before the serpent became a lie, it was a witness. Before it was a villain, it was a guardian. Before it became a cautionary tale for obedience, it was a symbol of the sacred descent that makes you more than what you were. And maybe that's the real crime. Not what the serpent said, not what it gave, but that it remembered who we were, before forgetting became survival. The serpent was never the villain, not in Sumer, not in Akkad, not in the temples of Enki, not at the gates of Inanna's descent. It was the guardian, the gift-giver, the reminder. But something changed, and it didn't happen slowly. Somewhere between the floodplains of Mesopotamia and the scrolls of Genesis, the serpent story was not just misunderstood. It was rewritten. In the Sumerian world, Enki, often linked to the serpent, was the god of wisdom, water, secrets, creation, and most dangerously, forbidden knowledge. He gave humans the meh, the divine codes of civilization. He helped Inanna. He tricked kings. He disobeyed the other gods. And he wasn't punished. He was respected. But in Genesis, the being who offers knowledge is not a god. He's a snake, a deceiver, a liar. And the knowledge, it's not divine order. It's sin. Same story, different lens. Different threat. The Genesis serpent offers Eve knowledge, the exact thing Enki gave in Sumerian myth. He doesn't tempt her with evil. He tells her the truth. Eat this and you will not die. You will be like the gods knowing. And he was right. They didn't die. Their eyes were opened. They became aware. Just like the humans shaped by Enki. Just like the flawed bodies sparked with rebel blood. Just like Inanna, who died, descended, and returned changed. So why did this serpent become the villain? Why did the gift of knowledge become the crime? Why was remembering suddenly dangerous? Because when knowledge is power, keeping people ignorant is control. Because a serpent that guards a threshold is sacred, but a serpent that teaches you to cross it yourself? That's a problem. The Genesis rewrite didn't erase the serpent's wisdom. It demonized it. It turned memory into sin, curiosity into disobedience, self-awareness into punishment. The serpent didn't lie. It told the truth. And the ones who feared that truth rewrote the story, so we wouldn't remember where we came from, or what we're capable of becoming. Let's find out about Kingu and the bloodline of the bound. His name was Kingu. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't a savior. He was a problem. In the Babylonian creation myth, Enuma Elish, Kingu was chosen by the goddess Tiamat, the mother of all creation, the endless ocean. When the younger gods murdered her husband Apsu, Tiamat rose in rage. She chose Kingu as her new consort, gave him the Tablet of Destinies, and made him commander of her army. He stood not for chaos, but for revenge, for loyalty, for the old ways. And for that he was defeated, captured, bound, and his blood was used to make us. We weren't just made from earth. Oh, blimey, I have my foot on an ant's nest. That's not very good. Sorry. Okay, we're back. We weren't just made from earth. We were made from the blood of the condemned, of a being who carried rage, injustice, and memory, a God who never got to finish his sentence, never got to speak his own name again. What does it do to a creation when their spark comes from a prisoner? What happens when your origin isn't purity, but blame? Maybe that's why we rebel. Maybe that's why we ache. Maybe that's why we crack open the sky with our voices. We weren't made to serve. We were made from someone who refused to. Kingu didn't write the tablets. He held them until they were torn from him. And when the gods wanted something less divine, but still alive enough to work, they took his blood, mixed it with earth, and called it human. We were born of rebellion, and we were never meant to know it. But some part of us remembers, the part that questions, the part that dreams, and the part that, even now, hears the serpent coiling near the fire. You were never clay alone. The gods made us to serve. That's what they said. But we didn't stay quiet. We didn't stay grateful. We didn't stay in line. According to the Atrahasis epic, a text older than Genesis, older than Exodus, humanity grew loud. Not evil, not wicked, just loud. Too many voices, too much life, too much divine spark. We worked, we multiplied, we remembered more than we were supposed to. And the gods? They panicked. They said we were disturbing their sleep. They called us noisy, restless, uncontrollable. And so they sent the flood. Look, as a parent, I have to say, as I was just reading this bit, honestly, like, my children disturb my sleep, okay? They are noisy as heck. They are restless. They are uncontrollable. They're frustrating. I love my children to bits, but they are all of that as well. And so let me just drown them. Yes, us as parents, when our children are too noisy and don't stop the racket, is that what we're going to do? For crying out loud. Honestly, these gods, I think they were just all spoiled brats. Tell you that now, all of them, everywhere we go, everywhere we look, they always have to throw a tantrum because they can't control their children, or their children are completely out of control. So instead of being kind and, teaching them, because I don't know, I was taught that my God that I was taught about was loving and kind and, all of that. And yet, when you look at the stories, he was actually, very nasty as well. So how can a father, how can a parent just go about it that way? I don't know. Sorry, rant. They always happen, and we'll just go with the flow. So, there you go. The story of the flood appears in Atrahasis, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Eridu Genesis, later in Genesis itself. And in every version, humans aren't wiped out for sin. They're wiped out for being too much, too aware, too fertile, too awake. The flood wasn't to wash us clean. It was to shut us up, to reset, to quiet the chaos of awakening. They gave us a rebel god's blood. They punished us for rebelling. They sparked our minds, and then drowned us for remembering. But the serpent, she never left. In Sumerian art, she winds through the roots of the world. In Akkadian seals, she coils beneath the mountains. In Babylon, she becomes Tiamat, the dragon of the deep. In every flood, the serpent is waiting below. Not dead, not defeated, just submerged. Watching. What if the serpent didn't cause the flood? What if she survived it? What if she carried something through the waters that couldn't be drowned? A memory, a name, a code in the blood. Something that would rise again as soon as someone dared to remember. They tried to drown the rebellion, but you can't drown what was made from blood and clay and coiled truth. The flood didn't erase us. It just bought them time. You've heard the story. A garden, a perfect man, a perfect woman, no death, no shame, no suffering, just obedience, order, divine design, until the serpent spoke, until the fruit was eaten, until the knowledge was claimed, and then the punishment. But what if that story wasn't the beginning? What if it wasn't a memory at all, but a reaction? The Genesis garden doesn't come first. Not in history, not in myth. The flood came first, the silencing, the drowning. After that, the story changed. Instead of beings made from rebel blood, we became dust. Instead of imperfect vessels filled with spark, we became sinners. Instead of seekers of truth, we became disobedient. The garden was not a memory, it was a correction, a warning, an if only. If only you had obeyed, if only you hadn't listened to the serpent, if only you hadn't tried to wake up. There was no paradise, there was no peace, only a story crafted after the flood to justify control. What better way to erase your power than to tell you you once had it but you lost it? What better way to stop you from remembering than to make you believe your awakening was a sin? The myth of Eden isn't about what happened. It's about what they needed you to believe after trying to drown what they couldn't contain. There was no perfect beginning, no pure slate, no innocent first breath. Only blood, clay, awakening, and a serpent who dared to tell the truth. So much of what we've been told about beginnings was designed to make us forget. To forget the rebel spark. To forget the flood wasn't about sin. To forget that obedience was never our native state. But something in us didn't forget. Maybe it was the clay. Maybe it was the blood. Maybe it was the way we kept asking why, long after we were told not to. Because the truth is, we were never just made, we were composed. Layer by layer, memory by memory, scar by scar. And that composition, it wasn't written in stone. It was written in us. What if the gods didn't leave scrolls? What if they left sequences? What if the spiral we see in ancient symbols isn't just myth? What if it's code? What if the body remembers what the stories only hint at? What if science isn't the enemy of mystery, but the next doorway into it? Next time we step out of the temples and into the laboratory, we leave the gods behind just for a moment and trace the real bloodline. One forged in extinction, survival, mutation, and chance. This was episode 9, Clay and Code, the serpent that wasn't lying. But next, we see what's written in the genes. Now, before we close, I want to leave space for gratitude. First, to Viagens Obscuras, Elodie and Inês, obrigada. Thank you so much. Your presence has been a steady hand on my back. The encouragement, the check-ins, the keep going when the thread gets heavy. Honestly, I am grateful to no end. You both are the grounded force, you know? And I don't know, your work just breathes, and honestly, I can't wait to meet you both. Thank you again for all your support and love. I love you to no end. If you speak Portuguese or understand Portuguese, give Viagens Obscuras a listen. They go deep, head and heart and soul, into everything that is dark. To Lila, thank you for your comment on episode 2. You named yourself agnostic and still came in with curiosity and care. That kind of listening matters, and honestly, it was just like a bit of reassurance that I can ask these questions. I'm allowed to, because There's not one book, and there is not one voice. And to everyone walking with me, listening, sharing, sending quiet messages, your support holds Bloodline and the other projects I'm carrying at the edges of my day. You make this feel less like shouting into a well and more like singing across a canyon and hearing a voice sing back. So thank you for standing with me at the threshold. I really appreciate all the support and all the love. And if you ever find yourself holding a thread, a question, a contradiction, a crack in the story you were handed, or if you just want to follow the story, come and find me on Instagram at Bloodline Myths. And don't forget, new episodes, new threads, every 2 weeks. For now, bye!